Hi, this is Muho, and it's April 30th of 2018 here at Antaiji. Tomorrow our Tenzo retreat will start, a 5-day retreat where we expect 14 guests. So for 5 days there's gonna be more than 30 people here at Antaiji, which is quite a lot. And the long-term residents will all be living in crowded rooms so that the retreat participants can have the rooms that usually are inhabited by the residents. And right now, today, we're cleaning these rooms, and we're also preparing for the rice planting, which is one of the main events. The fields are ready to be planted. Hopefully we can do that during the next couple of days. Today, once more, I would like to talk about something that Brad Warner posted to his YouTube account. So I'm gonna title this video on Delusional Enlightenment, Zen and God, Part 4. Although I'm not gonna talk about Zen and God this time, but about the question if enlightenment basically is delusional, which is a question that was asked to Brad Warner, and he posted his answer in a video that I will link to below. Basically the question is, a lot of accounts of enlightenment state that, for example, that when the Buddha was enlightened 2500 years ago, when he saw the morning star, not only did he himself attain nirvana, but all living beings simultaneously attained nirvana. And a lot of accounts of enlightenment share this point that it's not something personal, but at the moment when you attain it, the whole universe attains enlightenment. So the person who is asking Brad Warner is making a point that I made also in one of the previous videos, that if that's true, that at the moment of enlightenment all living beings in the universe attain enlightenment, how come that nobody seems to be aware of that? So the person who's asking the question to Brad Warner makes the point, well, isn't that delusional to claim that the experience you are having is shared by everybody else? Because obviously there's one person who's not sharing the experience, that's me. How can you claim that I'm also part of that experience? Isn't that kind of similar to a drug experience that people have? And Brad Warner says no, it's quite different from drug experiences. Also, Brad Warner is questioning our ordinary perception of reality. And he says, well, your idea of reality, isn't that also delusional? And I would think that Brad Warner has a point there, that nobody until now has found the final answer to what reality really is. What the world is, what our consciousness of the world is, why our consciousness of the world seems to be separate from other consciousness of the same world. How come that we seem to be all living in the same world, but everybody has slightly different ideas about how this world looks like? How come there's consciousness in the first place, and how come there's only one consciousness that I can call my consciousness, and so many other consciousness consciousnesses that I don't have to access to. So there's lots of theories about why that's the case, or if that's the case in the first place. Some people deny that this is the case. Some people deny there's an objective world. Some people deny there's consciousness. Quite strange claim to make, but there's even people who deny that there's consciousness in the first place. Other people deny there's a world in the first place. Some people agree there's consciousness, but there's only my consciousness. There are no other consciousnesses. Whatever. And I would agree with Brad Warner that our so-called normal perception of reality is also delusional. Another interesting point that Brad is making is he's challenging the questioner by saying, well, you know enlightenment only from accounts that people have made of the enlightenment experiences. That's just as if you wanted to talk about sex with only having knowledge of pornography. You're like somebody who has watched only pornography but still being a virgin, trying to talk about sex with me. Now that's an interesting claim, because I think Brad Warner is wrong there. And I think the questioner has a point there, because what the questioner basically is saying, now using the analogy with pornography and sex, when the questioner is asking, isn't enlightenment delusional, because the enlightened person claimed that everyone is enlightened when I'm not enlightened, obviously. That's like saying there are guys out there that have sex, they lost their virginity, and for some reason they claim that the moment I lost my virginity, everyone in the universe lost their virginity. And that's stupid, because I'm still a virgin. Well, I'm not, but with the enlightenment example, there's a guy who says, I never had an enlightenment experience. How come that the so-called enlightened masters claim that everybody was enlightened the moment they attained enlightenment? I never had sex in my life. There's some people out there who had sex, they lost their virginity, that's fine, but isn't it strange that they claim that everybody lost their virginity at that moment? That's basically the question that's asked to Brad Warner. And he's saying, well, you only say that because you know sex only from pornography. You don't really know what enlightenment is, you only know enlightenment from the accounts. But that doesn't really answer the question, or in fact, actually that's what the questioner himself is claiming. He says, I never had sex. How come you claim that I lost my virginity? And Brad Warner is saying, well, you only know pornography. Yes, that's exactly the problem of the person who's asking the question. He's saying, I'm still a virgin. I'm not enlightened. I'm not enlightened. How can you claim I'm enlightened? So to a great extent, I do sympathize with the guy who's asking this question. I sympathize with the idea that all these accounts of enlightenment, all these so-called experiences of enlightenment, are basically delusional. So I personally, with the few experiences that I have made so far, I would have no problem calling all of these delusional. All of these moments during Zazen where I thought I had a glimpse of something, and those glimpses helped me on the way. Still, I have no problems with categorizing these as just as delusional, like my ordinary perception. And my personal experiences are quite different from the experience, for example, that Brad Warner describes in his first book, Hardcore Zen. My experiences are more of the kind like in the Shoji chapter of the Shobogen. So when you let go of body and mind, throw them into the house of Buddha, which in the case of Zazen means you just throw yourself into Zazen. You let everything go and succumb to Zazen, succumb to what's happening in that moment, succumb to the reality of that moment. And then there's some kind of change. Well, Dogen Zenji says, from the side of the Buddha, everything is done. You don't have to invest any, you don't have to use your mind anymore. You don't have to exert any strength anymore. Everything is done from the side of the Buddha. So you completely let go and you realize there's something beyond yourself, your own strength, your own effort. You don't have to do Zazen, but Zazen is doing Zazen. I think that's a quite common experience, and in my case it never felt that at this moment I have this experience, everyone is sharing in that experience. It didn't feel like an individual experience either. It's kind of in that moment there is only that thing happening. So in a way you could say that the question if this is something that's personal or it's something that I share doesn't really arise. So it doesn't feel either like now I'm having this experience, but the person next to me is probably not having it. It's rather, well, in that moment, it's only this. It's only this. And as I do not know what others have felt in moments where, well, Brad Warner says it's not an experience that he had, it's more a change of understanding. So I don't know about those changes in understanding that occurred in other people. But what you read sometimes in books is that you return to that state before you discriminate between yourself and others. So what would that state be? In psychology, there's a famous experiment. They ask, or they show kids, they tell kids a story. I think it's about a girl called Sally. Sally has a cake on her desk, and before she goes to school and leaves the cake on her desk. And while she is in school, Sally's mom puts the cake into the refrigerator. Sally comes back from school and she wants to eat her cake. Where does she look for the cake? That's they tell kids this story and they ask the kids, where would Sally look for the cake? And until the age of 2 or 3, most kids say Sally will look for the cake in the refrigerator. And people above that age, kids, usually so-called normal kids above the age of 3, will answer, well, she will look for the cake on the desk, of course. And that's what probably most grown-ups will answer. Because Sally has no way of knowing that her mom put the cake into the refrigerator when she was in school. So why do 2-year-olds suppose that Sally will look for the cake in the refrigerator? That's because 2-year-olds don't have that conception of other minds yet. They suppose that what they know, the knowledge that they have, is shared by the whole universe. 2 years old think that if they're in pain, the whole universe must be in pain. That's also why 2 years old are kind of the most violent kids, because they don't realize yet that the pain that others feel is real. If I'm not in pain, nobody's in pain. If I'm in pain, everyone is in pain. So for 2 years old, if they're in pain, that's the end of the world. It's a big problem. If somebody else is in pain, it doesn't really exist for 2 years old. Why is that? Because 2 years old don't know yet that I'm different from the universe. In a way, they're enlightened. But if that's enlightenment, of course, the question, isn't that delusional? Isn't that a big illusion to think that only your pain is real? That only your enlightenment experience is real, and that your enlightenment experience, just because you had it, is shared by the whole universe. So I think a lot of these stories about enlightenment sound like the perspective of a 2-year-old, and actually a lot of enlightened persons that I met in the past reminded me of big babies. Could be also an explanation why so many enlightened people don't get along with each other, because they all suppose that they're the only enlightened ones, and an enlightenment experience that I didn't have isn't a real enlightenment experience. So a lot of enlightened masters seem to suppose that they're the only enlightened ones and nobody else had a real enlightenment experience, except maybe their master and their best students, whoever. Yeah. So now for the rest of the video, I still want to make some kind of sense of this claim that enlightenment is actually shared by the whole universe. Up to now, up to this point, I raised my doubts. Saying that when people that are supposedly enlightened talk about their enlightenment experience or their change of understanding or whatever, it sounds very much like what a 2-year-old would say about the universe. So now I want to try to make some sense. Brett Warner in his video also talks about that there's only the now. Today is April 30th of 2018. There's no other real day right now. Yesterday was April 29th. It's not real anymore. The only way it's real is that I still have memories of April 29th. So the only way April 29th is real is that it's part of April 30th. It's part of today. Tomorrow, May 1st, the retreat will start, but that's also something that I anticipate right now. The only way it's real, it's part of today. We are planting the rice that's going to be harvested in autumn. Also, the only way that's real, it's right now. We're doing the planting, and right now we anticipate that we're going to harvest the rice in autumn. But there's no reality to autumn except that right now we're thinking about the autumn, we're preparing for the autumn. But if you ask me where is the autumn? It's nowhere. On the other hand, of course, I would be a fool to not believe that there's going to be one day, for example, October 13th, 2018, where, for example, you might be watching this video on October 13th, 2018, and if you do so on that day, it's going to be today. On that day, April 30th will be no more than a memory. So there's gonna be a day different from April 30th when it's going to be now. Which is just another reason that it's always now, and there's nothing outside of now. It's always now, and the whole of time, the whole universe is part of this now. But it would be foolish to claim that just because it's always now, it's always today. It would be foolish to claim there's no other day than April 30th. April 30th of 2018 is the only real day. I can only make that claim because today is April 30th. But when you're watching that on any other day, you're going to say, well, you must be stupid to make that claim. And you're right. You're completely right. Whenever you watch this video, it's going to be now. And it's going to be today, but it's not going to be necessarily April 30th of 2018. So the reason why the claims that enlightened people make often sound delusional to us is because what they are trying to say is basically it's always now. Whatever day of the year it might be, it's going to be today, it's going to be now. But what they're actually saying in their words, it's today, April 30th, is the only day. And because April 30th is now, all of the other days during the year, if they're real in the first place, they're also now. But they are not now. They are not now. Or this claim that we're basically all parts of the same universe. Also the claim that we're all part of the same consciousness. There's only one consciousness of the universe, and we're all part of the same consciousness. Also, it seems to be false, obviously, because, as I said in one of the earlier videos, you don't know what I had for breakfast. I have no idea what you had for breakfast. If I'm in pain now, you have no idea about that. If you're in pain right now, I don't feel that pain. So how come we are supposedly part of the same consciousness? But then again, just as there's only one now, and everything is part of this one now, you could make the claim that there's only one consciousness, and this is this consciousness right now. Show me another consciousness than this consciousness. There's no other consciousness than this consciousness. Some people claim that consciousness is basically the same as a brain. A lot of philosophers make this point, that basically what we call consciousness is just another aspect of the brain. But there's one counter-argument, a pretty strong counter-argument, as I think. You can show me 100 brains, and maybe there's a way where you can allow me to also have a look at my own brain. You can show me 100 brains, and one of these brains is my brain. And you can ask me which of these 100 brains is your brains, and I might try to find out which of the 100 brains is my brains. And I might find the right brain. I might be able to discover my brain among those 100 brains that you show me. I also might pick the wrong brain. Who knows? Now, each of these 100 brains has a consciousness. You might also then ask me, here there are 100 consciousnesses. Try to figure out which is your consciousness. Is there a way I pick the wrong consciousness? No, because for me there's only this consciousness, which in my view is a pretty strong argument against the claim that the brain and the consciousness are more or less the same thing. If they're more or less the same thing, there's no way I could ever pick the wrong brain, that I could ever identify the wrong brain as my brain. But there's no way I could identify the wrong consciousness as my consciousness, because for me there's always only one consciousness that's real, and that's what I call my consciousness. But actually there's no need to call it my consciousness, because it's the only consciousness. There's no other consciousness. So in a way, it's obvious when spiritual people claim that we're all one consciousness. There's only one consciousness, because yes, I mean, that's true. And that's exactly also the reality that a 2-year-old lives. There's only one consciousness. There's only one consciousness, and if I feel pain, the whole universe is filled with pain. If I get enlightened, then the whole universe realizes enlightened. In a way, that's true. And that's even true the moment when you watch this video, maybe on October 13th, whenever. When you watch this video, there's still only gonna be this consciousness. The only difference being that just as now is April 13th, when you watch the video, it might be October 13th. Now, what I call this consciousness is Muho's consciousness. The moment you watch this video, this consciousness is gonna be what I might call your consciousness. Right now, your consciousness is nothing more than part of my consciousness, something that I imagine that must be out there somewhere, but actually it's nowhere except in my consciousness. The moment you watch this video, this consciousness is going to be the consciousness that is aware of Muho talking there in front of the camera. You're listening to this voice, and there's nothing but this consciousness. What I call my consciousness right now will exist nowhere except inside what I call your consciousness right now, which is going to be this consciousness, the only consciousness that exists. So in this way, of course, it's almost trivial to claim that there's only one consciousness and we're all part of this consciousness. It's the same claim as there's only now. Whatever time in the history of mankind it's going to be, or in the history of the universe, it's always going to be now. That's also, I think, one of the reasons why all of the movies that depict time travel are so dissatisfying, at least to me. Like whenever there's time travel, the main character is traveling to the future and he's now, wow, I'm in the future, or he's going to the past and, well, now I'm in the past. That's not time travel. If you do time travel, then you're going to be in the now. You won't even realize that you're time traveling. So to put it the other way around, if you want to know what time travel is, just look at where you are right now. Right now you're traveling in the future. It's just that because you're in the future, you don't realize it. You're in the now. You could also say, from a future perspective, you're being in the past. You're traveling. You're actually right now. I am experiencing a time travel to the past. It's just that because I'm in the past, it's now for me. Wherever we are, and we could go to the past, we could go to the future. We're always going to be in the now. The same that also sometimes depicted in movies or in novels. Somebody is actually entering somebody else's mind, or the mind of one person and another person, they switch. And again, usually when that's depicted in a novel or in a movie, it's kind of dissatisfying because that person is kind of surprised, oh, now I'm a different person. If you really become a different person, you wouldn't even realize. It could be that until yesterday, actually, I was Brett Warner, for example. And today, when I woke up, I became Muho, but because I'm Muho now, I'm just this consciousness. I'm just this consciousness, and I don't even have a realization of this traveling between one consciousness or the other, because how could there be any such realization? Because it's always going to be this consciousness. Which reminds me of an interesting theory that you can find on Wikipedia, but only Japanese Wikipedia. All of you are probably familiar with the idea of transmigration or rebirth. A lot of Buddhists believe in that. Also, there's quite a good number of Buddhists who don't believe in it, but basically it works like this. Like what I write here, that's kind of basically the flow of time. This arrow here is the flow of time. And at one point, let's say this is the 19th century. You might have been born in the 19th century and you died. And let's say that's you. And then you travel, according to, well, Buddhist theory, it's 49 days that you have to decide where you want to be reborn. Or basically it takes 49 days until whatever reincarnation occurs. Could be here. And then you live for another 50 years, 60 years, 70 years. You could be reborn as a fly, as an insect. Maybe you live only 1 day, 2 days, whatever. You go somewhere else. And according to this theory of reincarnation, whenever there were living beings in the universe, somewhere you were always present in one of these organisms until you finally realize nirvana and you're not reborn anymore. And now this interesting theory that I was talking about, that you can find on Japanese Wikipedia, and I think they attribute it to a biologist called Watanabe Tsuneo, I think was the name. Well, basically what he is saying is, isn't it possible that we actually manifest all of the organisms? So it's not only that you kind of travel here in time from one to the other, but actually there's also going to be an instance where to ask, well, are you first this and later that one, or are you first that one and later this organism? Doesn't really make sense, because it's a different order there. It's not the temporal order, but basically what he's saying is we are all consciousnesses in the whole of time, in the whole of universe. We're going to be all of them at one point. To call it one point in time would be a contradiction, because this would be a point in time, and we are several at one point of time, but right now you're only one. Right now you're only one. You're this consciousness right now. But wherever you go, it's going to be now. Wherever you go, it's going to be this consciousness. So this consciousness is actually also this consciousness. This, just as this now is this now, when it becomes there. So I'm not saying that that's a less delusional concept of reality than our ordinary concept of reality, or the so-called enlightened concept of reality. I mean, this model, the guy who proposed this model, he's just a biologist. He's not an enlightened. He doesn't claim enlightened. He's not some kind of guru. But it's at least this kind of an inspiring model that actually right now it's April 30th. It's no other day during the year. It's April 30th, 2018. There's only going to be this one day in the history of the universe, and actually there's no other day. In the same way I could claim right now there's only this consciousness that looks through the eyes of Muho, that hears with the ears of Muho. There's only Muho's consciousness. But the reason I can make that claim is because right now I'm Muho. Right now is April 30th, 2018. When you watch this on a different day, it's going to be a different consciousness at a different time. But it's going to be now, and it's going to be this consciousness. And in this sense, and only in this sense, we can actually claim that there's only one now. And it encompasses the whole of history. And there's only one consciousness that encompasses all of the consciousnesses. But whenever we make this point, whenever we make this claim from one point, from one perspective, yeah, I would say it's delusional. It becomes delusional. It becomes what a 2-year-old would say. And, well, fortunately or unfortunately, I don't have any drug experiences, so I can't judge if a so-called enlightenment experience is essentially different from a drug experience. A lot of people claim that it's no different, and therefore it's helpful. It can be helpful to a meditative practice if you take drugs. I have doubts on that. Brad Warner seems to have doubts on that. The other day he was quoting on his Twitter, he was quoting Robin Hitchcock saying something like, there's these people that space out on LSD or they smoke marijuana and they feel at peace with the whole universe. But for some reason, they seem to be annoyed if somebody comes into the room and it takes part of their attention away from this universal peace. Which also reminds me, there was this book that came out a couple of years ago by, I think it was a woman who works in maybe even brain science. She was a doctor, I think. And she had this brain hemorrhage at a young age. And I think it was her, either the left or the right half of the brain that was affected, and for some weeks she could only use one half of the brain. So, and I think the half of the brain that she couldn't use, that she could use at the time, she was hospitalized in a room that she had to share with another woman. And only one half of the brain was working. I think it was the brain that's not involved in discriminative thinking. So she felt one with the universe at the time. She felt at peace. She even is using the word nirvana there. Basically, I was in nirvana at the time. Interestingly, she devotes several pages of her book to bitching about the other woman that she had to share her room with, and kind of the guests that were visiting the other person in the room, or basically she's claiming that other woman was kind of taking away the attention of the guests. There were guests that came to visit me, but actually that other woman was engaging with my guests. That's kind of a very human thing, of course, but it's strange to hear from a woman that claims that she was in nirvana. It's strange to hear from a woman that says, well, only the part of my brain that's not discriminating was working. Well, how come that you're so annoyed by somebody taking away the attention of your guests from you? Whatever. So I agree with Brad Warner that drugs have nothing to do in any spiritual practice, but for the same reason I think that also these accounts of enlightenment experiences or changes of understanding are also overvaluated. Often it seems to be nothing more than a grown-up going back to the understanding of reality that they had as a 2-year-old, which is kind of just as valid as often an understanding. I mean, it's in a sense, the understanding that a 2-year-old has of reality is a more direct experience. It's basically it's more or less faithful for what's actually happening right now. Right now, if I'm in pain, that's the only thing I can feel. And all the pain that other people, other consciousnesses might experience at this time is only something I imagine. It's not real. So in a way you could say a 2-year-old is right in their understanding of the universe. It's just that we couldn't function in this reality, in society, if we lived only as 2-year-olds. So if enlightenment means to live and experience this universe as a 2-year-old, then thank God we're not enlightened. At least most of the time we're not enlightened. Thank God, because yes, just as the guy challenging Brett Warner, I would agree. If that's enlightenment, well, it's just another delusion, and it's no better than our normal delusion of reality. Okay, so much from my side for today. Is enlightenment delusional? Maybe it is. Just as delusional as to say today is April 30th, and that's the only day. It is the only day, but only when it's April 30th. Or I could also say there's only one consciousness in the universe, and that's Muho's consciousness. True, but only when Muho says it. When you watch this video, it's still gonna be this consciousness, but it's not Muho's consciousness, and probably it's not gonna be April 30th of 2018 anymore. So oneness is one thing, but we also, I think, need to admit and, well, appreciate that no two things are actually the same. No 2 days during the year are the same. No two minds can ever be the same. What connects them? What connects two minds? What connects 2 points in time? That's a mystery. It's a complete mystery to me, so I don't know. What is this now? Which is now, but will also be now on October 13th. What is this consciousness, which is now Muho's consciousness, but will be your consciousness when you watch this video? I don't know. Except that, well, the obvious answer, it's this now. This now. But again, we shouldn't claim that April 30th and October 13th are the same day. They are not the same day. They're completely different days. And I'm not you, you are not me. Okay, so much from my side. No answers, no revelations about the true reality of the universe in these videos, just more questions and my doubts about some answers that have been given in the past. At least from my perspective, the answer hasn't been given yet, and maybe will never be given, because, I mean, how could April 30th ever find out about the reality of October 13th? There's no way for April 30th to find out about all the other days in the year, and in the same way there's no way to find out for this Muho about the reality of Brett Warner and about the reality of you. The only thing I know that this is happening right now. Okay, thank you for your attention and see you at some other point.